everyone, it's Nina. Thanks for joining me today. I am really excited to be participating in Pretty Pink Posh's 4th birthday celebration, and I've got a couple of cards to share with you that feature some of the new products that they released in celebration of their birthday. So I started off by taking the Birthday Friends stamp set. I'm going to be stamping the images down onto some Canson Bristol Smooth paper using some Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink. Now I'm going to be stamping quite a few images. I did stamp the kids and some of the other accessories off screen, and I didn't color them on camera because there's a lot of things that I want to show you in this video, and the coloring was very simple. So I'm just going to show you quickly that I took some Zig Clean color markers and also some Arteza pens, and I colored in all the different images using a very colorful color scheme such as pinks, purples, I used a little bit of mint, some yellow, and a few other things tossed in between. But the majority of the colors feature a purple, pink, and mint color combination with a bit of yellow. So I colored the images basically with just one marker, added some shading in the areas that I wanted to be darkest, and then I blended that out with a brush and some water. I'm using the Zen watercolor brushes, and when I'm adding the color down, I'm making sure not to saturate the paper too heavily, as I don't want the colors to get too light. I want them to stay fairly intense. You can see the kids there right on the left. I colored a bunch of the presents, I colored some of the balloons, and I colored then of course the kids. And like I said, I colored that in the very colorful color scheme. So once I finished coloring the images, then I took the coordinating dies and ran them through my Blossom mini die cutting machine from Altenew. Now I really like this machine for cutting out coordinating dies because it is a perfect size and most dies will fit on this. So it's really handy and super quick and easy. I don't have to pull out my big giant die cutting machine to do this. Afterwards, I went ahead and started to assemble the pieces and figure out how I'm going to want to create my scene. So there's this new storybook die from Pretty Pink Posh that I'm adding onto this white panel here, which I'm going to cut with a stitched rectangle die from Simon Says Stamp. Now I'm using these two dies in particular to create a nice stitching edge that looks really nice together. There are those leftover negative pieces that you can use on another card. I'm going to save those for another point in time. Now here's a background that I created. My sister actually helped me do this. She loves to paint. She's 2.5 and she loves creating things with markers and watercolors especially. And she was painting one afternoon with me and we created this really fun and colorful background. So she did most of the work. I just put the color down and then she went ahead and blended it all out. And it turned out really great. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that down with the storybook die. So now I have those negative pieces cut with that nice stitching edge. I added foam tape to the back side of the white panel, and I'm also adding some really small strips of foam tape into those really small bars separating the rectangles and squares. And I'm attaching that entire piece down onto just a piece of white cardstock. Doesn't matter what you use because this is just going to be a backing to hold all of the negative little rectangles and squares that we're going to add into place. So this is basically a little bit of inlay die cutting. I'm using my dot long liner to go ahead and adhere all these down. And after I've fitted them into place, now I can start adding the kids and the balloons and other accessories on top. So I used some foam tape to attach these down. I kept the kids in the larger rectangles and then I put the presents in the squares. And I really love how these lay out in the storybook die. It's so much fun and really cute to make these little scenes out of these. For the little party hats on each of the kids, I did use some liquid glue to adhere these down. These were the only things that I adhered down with liquid glue. Afterwards, I'm ready to go ahead and move on to adding my sentiments. So for the sentiment, I chose this birthday wishes sentiment that's in the Birthday Friends set from Pretty Pink Posh. I stamped the birthday part in some doll pink ink, which matched the pink in the watercoloring really nicely. And then for the rest of the sentiment, this stamp is actually cut apart, just so you know. I did stamp that other sentiment down onto some mint cardstock with clear ink and added some white embossing powder on top of that. And I'll heat set this to get a nice white impression. I trimmed that little sentiment into a little banner and then I'll pop that up with some foam tape underneath the word birthday. For some embellishing, I love the Pretty Pink Posh iridescent star confettis. So I've got the larger confetti and I also have the smaller confetti and I'm mixing these in between the kids, and I love that this adds some nice interest to the background, but it's not overpowering and it's not distracting. So it creates a really fun effect and it changes colors as the light hits it. Now I also wanted to add a few more extra details. So I brought in some Jelly Roll glaze pens. I used black for the eyes and then I also brought in this clear pen. Now the nice thing about these Jelly Roll pens, the glazed ones, they dry dimensional. So as I'm adding this clear embellishment down onto the presents, I also added it to the party hats and the balloons. Afterwards, I end up with a great dimensional and shiny effect. It's almost kind of like glossy accents, but much flatter. And it also doesn't reactivate the watercolor underneath. So the watercolor stays true, but yet we still have that awesome glossy shine. So I really love how this card turned out. It's super sparkly and fun and really has a great birthday feel to it. Now, as I was creating that card, I had also created a cake and I had made some extra balloons. And I wanted to be able to use those on a card as well. So I'm bringing in that same watercolor panel that my sister and I had created. And I'm going to cut this down with these Pretty Pink Posh scalloped frame rectangle die set. This is the smaller of the two dies that are included in that set. So I've got some balloons here and I'm just kind of deciding which part of that background that I want to be able to use. And I ended up choosing the part that has a lot more blue in it. I really liked how the combination of the blue, pink, and purple looked. And I thought that would be a nice contrast to the cake and the balloons that I'll be adding on top. So this is the area that I'm going to go ahead and die cut that from. I will trim it out with some scissors so that way I can fit this into my Platinum 6 die cutting machine. The next step is I took my card base, which is in white A2 card base, and I'm using my scoreboard to create some scored lines on the card base. I wanted some texture on the card base. I didn't want it to be perfectly clean and white. I wanted there to be something. So I thought the scoring would be a nice little bit of interest to the background, and I did this in like a crosshatch design, so it has a really cool and fun movement to it. So I attached the scalloped rectangle frame down with both foam tape on the middle part, and then I used liquid glue for the frame portion. And that liquid glue that I'm using is Collage Medium again. It's my favorite liquid glue now. I used to use PPA Matte, which is also a great glue, but I really enjoy working with the Collage Medium because I find it's actually just as strong, but it also has a much more clearer finish once it dries, and it's matte. So I really like that. So after I've attached down my frames, I'm going to then take the cake and the balloons, both of these have foam tape on them, and I'm going to attach them down onto my panel. I'm just kind of placing them where I'm going to want them to be, making sure I have them lined up right. And then I'll add a final balloon in the center because I wanted to have an odd number of balloons and also fill in that little empty space there. So I just popped an extra yellow balloon in there. Now I'm going to go ahead and move on to creating my sentiment. So the sentiment is from the birthday party die set from Echo Park, and I'm using the birthday word. And I'm also going to pull in some Tonic Studios mirror cardstock. This is so gorgeous. I have loved using the mirror cardstocks. I have some of them. I don't have all of them, but the ones that I have, I've been using like crazy. So I'm going to go ahead and use the purple color here. This is the gloss finish, not the satin. There's a satin and a gloss. And I believe there might be a pearl finish too. Either way, I'm going to go ahead and use the mirror cardstock in the gloss finish. I also die cut that same birthday word in 3 layers of white cardstock, and then I'll add the purple on top of that. So I have a total of 4 layers for the sentiment, and that gives it some nice dimension off of the card. Then I'll also bring in that same clear pen and again add some nice detail to the icing on the cake, because of course you have to have shiny icing. And I also added it to the cake stand, and I added glitter this time to the balloon. Now for some sequins, I brought in these fun sequin mix colors from one of the new Pretty Pink Posh sequin mix sets. And I also pulled in those iridescent stars, and I'm adding these down onto the background. Now, the fun thing that I did with these particular sequins, and also on another card that I'll show you here in just a second, is I added 2 layers of glossy accents into the center of each of these sequins. And what happens is it creates this really cool domed effect and almost makes them look like clear droplets with a tint in them. And I really liked how the result looked. So this was a really fun technique. I unfortunately didn't catch it on camera, but I did add just 2 layers of that glossy accents into the center of each of these sequins, and that's how I created that domed effect. Alright, so one more card I want to share with you. You can see more still pictures of this card over at my blog. I don't have a tutorial on this one, only because I had done this one at one point while I was just relaxing and doing some watercoloring, and then decided to turn it into a card. I used the new Petunias stamp set from Pretty Pink Posh, and I stamped those down in some different Simon ink colors in different colors. So I've got like sage, steel blue, winter sky, and a few other different colors, and stamped those down. So I created some tone on tone effects by adding the color then on top of that in the same colors that match the inks. So it almost has a no line kind of effect, and I really loved the result. It's got this beautiful script thank you sentiment on there, which is also from Pretty Pink Posh. And then again, I took some of those Northwest sequins, which are new from the Pretty Pink Posh 4th birthday release, and added those onto the background and added some of that glossy accents into the center to create the domed effect on this one as well. So I hope that you enjoyed this video and got some inspiration on using some of the newest products from Pretty Pink Posh. You can head on over to my blog to get more information on all of these cards, including the supplies used and still pictures. Don't forget that this is part of a blog hop, so there is a giveaway as part of the hop, so I encourage you to head on over to my blog to learn how you can enter into that giveaway. Thanks so much for watching. I will be back soon with more inspiration for you, and until then, have a fabulous day. Bye!